In Kentucky alone, the disaster has impacted more than 5 states across the country. 2 freight ships have collided off the southern coast of Sweden, leading one of the vessels to capsize. At least 2 people have been reported as missing. Media reports that a British-registered Scot carrier and a Danish ship came together. Authorities in Denmark and Sweden say several Coast Guard vessels and helicopters have been sent to the scene. In the UK, more than 500,000 learner drivers are still waiting to take their test because of a backlog caused by the coronavirus lockdowns. The figures come from the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, and the AA driving school has warned the backlog is too long and a clear plan is needed. Tests were halted during the pandemic, with many facing significant delays to book a test. Motoring journalist Quentin Wilson told GB News the industry had been neglected for too long.
And it's like the HGV crisis. It's an industry we have not supported or cherished enough. So I'd be saying that we really do need to have a push to get more people in this industry so we've got more people able to test these kids.
You're right up to date. I'll bring you the latest headlines at 2:30. Right now, back to Gloria and Liam.
Thanks very much, Rosie. Coming up to today on the Piero and Halligan.
The Prime Minister puts his booster jab drive at the very top of the NHS list as he confirms today that 1 person has died from the Omicron variant.
But where does this leave the rest of NHS treatments? We're asking, is it right that the National Health Service does prioritise COVID?
Plus, it's not just the NHS that will face a backlog, but those waiting to take their driving tests are facing huge delays. We'll have the latest on that too.
And as always, it's not just our guests we want to hear from, so join the debate with your views. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us @GBNews. Stay with us.
It's dominating the news headlines today. The Prime Minister has declared an Omicron emergency just hours after the UK's COVID alert level was raised to 4.
In a recorded address to the nation last night, Boris Johnson said it was, quote, clear that 2 doses of the vaccine are simply not enough, he said, to combat the Omicron variant, and he urged all adults to get themselves a 3rd dose.
He warned that there is a tidal wave of Omicron coming and we must be prepared. The government has pledged that 1 million booster jabs will be given out daily and offered to all adults over 18 in England.
To do this, the NHS will now have to prioritise giving out the booster vaccines alongside the help of the British Army. This means NHS appointments and non-urgent treatments will once again be pushed back and delayed until the new year.
Here's what the Prime Minister had to say.
Today, we're launching the Omicron emergency booster national mission, unlike anything we've done before in the vaccination programme. To get boosted now. A fortnight ago, I said we would offer every eligible adult a booster by the end of January. To hit the pace we need, we'll need to match the NHS's best vaccination day so far and then beat that day after day. This will require an extraordinary effort, and as we focus on boosters and make this new target achievable, it will mean some other appointments will need to be postponed until the new year.
Now, currently, there are 10 people in hospital in the UK who've tested positive with the Omicron variant. Sorry, that number's in England. And earlier this afternoon, Boris Johnson confirmed the first death in the UK.
So, is this right? Should the NHS prioritise COVID once again? When the South African doctor, Dr Angelique Coetzee, who discovered the Omicron variant, insists it is still mild. The Prime Minister takes a different view on that and says to describe it as mild should be a thought that is put to one side.
Let's start this discussion with the London GP, Dr David Lloyd. Dr Lloyd, do you think the government's got it right with the current booster shot strategy?
I think they've got it right that we've got to get people booster vaccinated, and I think the phrase "get boosted now" I think is a very good one. I think yes. I'm afraid I think it is right. We are facing the 4th wave. We've got it wrong every wave so far. So yes, we must do everything we can. The trouble is, it's a bit difficult nowadays, isn't it? We've shut down the big vaccine centres. We've got doctors and nurses and pharmacists and healthcare assistants who've been helping the vaccination work before this, who've now got full-time jobs back in general practice. And it's jolly difficult to see how we can do both. But we'll try very hard. We'll try and do what the PM wants and do it. And I think the other thing that was quite nice is that he said something about the army too, didn't he? I've been saying this for ages. Wouldn't it be great if we could train up a few thousand army personnel to come along and give the jabs rather than very expensive doctors and nurses?
Some NHS leaders are suggesting that that very ambitious objective to offer every adult the jab by the end of this month, it's just not realistic. Can it be?
Well, they've said that we've got to offer, I think to be technical. So I don't think that they're asking us to have achieved the everybody done by the end of December. But yes, it's a very, very big ask indeed. I think we did 750,000 in one day at the weekend. We've got to get up to 1 million a day for the rest of December. So it's going to be a very, very big thing to do. But we must all do it. And I think that please tell your listeners and people who watch you not to be deterred by all the publicity. There is a very good website which tells you which clinics are open, which walk-in centres you can go to get vaccinated. Be patient, go along, get in the queue and get yourself vaccinated. It is vitally important.
Dr. Lloyd, to what extent do you think we should listen to Angelique Coetzee, the South African doctor who discovered Omicron? She says, and South Africa, I guess, are ahead, if ahead is the right word, by a few weeks, us here in the UK in terms of this variant. She says the evidence so far shows it's a mild virus, and so we should delay in terms of taking very stringent lockdown measures.
Well, I'm very pleased to hear that. And yes, that's one of the assumptions that one can make, is that this virus is less virulent than the previous versions of the virus. And as you know, because I know you lot are all way more expert than I am about these things, but as you know, as viruses progress in their lifespan, they get progressively less virulent. So the cold virus might have killed us all 1,000 years ago, but now just causes us to have the sniffles. So eventually the COVID virus will become much less virulent than it is now, because it's in the virus's best interest to keep us all alive so that it can spread the virus about. You can't spread the virus if you're dead. So the virus will become less virulent, and hopefully this one is a little less virulent. But if you do the numbers, if it is as infectious as it says it is, so it is every time someone gets infected, they're infecting another 3 others, then very quickly you get this exponential growth, and you will have hundreds of thousands of cases of the Omicron around the country. And even if you have a smaller percentage of them getting sick and dying, because of the sheer numbers, we are going to have an awful lot of death on our hands. And so that is the problem. It is, on the one hand, it's good news that it may be less virulent, but on the other hand, it is far more infectious. So that's the thing that we all worry about in the health service, and that's all the thing that we're getting exhausted about. And the other important thing, of course, is that the double vaccination does not seem to be very effective against the Omicron. So we get a big boost in protection if we have a booster dose. And so that's why we've really got to have this all-out effort to get everybody vaccinated. And that means everybody. We must resist these anti-vaxxers who are saying that it's an infringement of their liberty, or their bodies can't be invaded, or they're being experimented on, or there wasn't enough time to build the virus vaccine. We have got to get people vaccinated. Speaking very personally, I sit here where I am now. This is below the stairs. Below me is our COVID hub where we deal with COVID in the community. We admitted 3 patients to hospital on Friday. We are monitoring 50 very unwell people at home with COVID. And I've no doubt that 2 or 3 of those will have to go into hospital over the next day or two. It is a very real problem for us. And we see a lot of very sick people. And very importantly, the people we send into hospital are unvaccinated.
Dr. David Lloyd, GP based in North London, thanks as ever for your time and expertise.
Sorry.
We do appreciate it. Thank you.
Joining us now is Lisa King. Lisa's husband tragically passed away after having his appointments cancelled and postponed earlier in the pandemic. Lisa, we've spoken to you before, and that interview will stay with me. It's thank you for going through this again. I know how hard it is for you. Just tell us what happened to your husband, Peter.
Last July, he had pain in his stomach, on the right-hand side of his stomach. I emailed the GP as I had done before, and I was quite specific as to where the pain was. And I asked them for a face-to-face appointment for him because he had underlying health condition. I emailed back and said, no, it's not having a face-to-face, a GP will call. A GP did call, and my husband, Peter, told them how much pain he was in, where the pain was, and the doctor he listened to him. Peter said to him, you do have my medical notes, don't you? He said, no, I don't have them to hand. He said, well, I have a condition called genetic hemochromatosis. It's treatable, but I haven't had my venous sections that I have to have all year because they've been cancelled. He said, oh, that doesn't matter. I think you've just got acid reflux. Just go to the pharmacy and pick up a prescription that I'm going to send for you. But Peter said to him, I'm in a lot of pain. It's keeping me up at night. I've been really sick with it. He said, look, you've just got acid reflux. That's all. So he took the prescription. After 5 days, he was violently sick. He was screaming in pain. He was screaming so much that I was crying, he was crying, our sons were crying. I called an ambulance. They came quite quickly and they took him to hospital. And he had a problem with his gallbladder. A stone had moved from his gallbladder and had lodged in his bile duct. Because of his underlying health condition, he had an infection that sent his iron levels shooting up. And the hospital couldn't operate because they had a backlog. They took the stone out, but they said he had to come back in about 4 weeks' time to have his gallbladder removed. 4 weeks to the day that he was due to go and have it removed, another stone had lodged in his bile duct. He had a surge of iron in his heart. And he had a heart attack and died at home.
It's such a harrowing story, Lisa, and we're so grateful to you for sharing your grief with us and with our viewers. I guess I can only ask you, in your heart of hearts, do you feel that Peter would still be with us had he been able to see a GP face-to-face? And if you do feel that, what makes you feel that so strongly?
Well, 100% I know he would be here today, because if he'd have seen his GP face-to-face, he would have been able to point to exactly where it was. And the GP would have instantly known that that was in the gallbladder area. And taken into account his medical history, he would have been able to be treated straight away before any infection could have set in, which would have affected his iron levels. And I know he would be here with me today. I know that. But he, like all the other patients that have been denied treatment and will now again be denied treatment, they've just been sacrificed for the greater good. Now, I'm not having a go at the GPs, frontline doctors, nurses, I'm not. They followed the guidelines that they were told. And those guidelines are wrong then as they are now. Diseases do not stop. People do not stop getting ill because there is a coronavirus going round. A variant, as they will always be, will never go. But they'll just sacrifice people, again, that need the treatment. And this is what I say to Boris Johnson and his advisors. Every family like mine, with Christmas coming, will see the space at the dinner table where they would be. And every family that has gone through or going through what me and my sons have gone through will be reminded of that loss, that person, husband, wife, son, daughter, should be with them at their dinner table, but they won't be.
Lisa, you've shown tremendous courage, as you have in the past, talking to us here on GB News. Gloria and I are really moved by your interview, and I'm sure many of our viewers are as well. Nothing can bring back Peter King,
No.
but I'm sure he'd be proud of you were he watching today. Thank you very much, Lisa King.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
God bless.
Thank you.
Remember to email us your thoughts and stories, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet us @gbnews. Just after 2:30, we're dedicating time to hear your views.
Up next, it's not just NHS appointments that are facing a backlog, but those waiting to take their driving test are also being delayed. Our reporter Will Hollis will have that story next, but before that, it's your weather forecast.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. A three-way split with the weather this Monday. Bright and blustery across the far north. Some rain across parts of northern England and Wales in particular. In the far south, it's mild, but it's pretty murky. The three-way split caused by this waving weather front straddling across the UK. This low brought some very strong winds through the night and first thing across the Northern Isles. Easing down a bit but staying blustery here. Showers across the Highlands, but much of Scotland, Northern Ireland dry and bright. Then this damp zone covering parts of Yorkshire through to Lancashire and across North and West Wales, staying fairly soggy here. A bit damp and drizzly in the southwest. Much of the south dry but predominantly cloudy. But it is mild here. Temperatures could get into the teens, whereas only single figures further north. Add on that wind and it feels pretty fresh. And the showers continuing to come in across the Highlands and the Western Isles through the evening. The rain will trickle south, so turning damp and dank through South Wales and the Midlands for a time overnight. Some mist and fog is possible. Might just about drop down to freezing in one or two places, but certainly most towns and cities just about hovering above freezing and well above freezing in the south, staying very mild. But staying quite murky here, damp and drizzly for southern England, South Wales during Tuesday. Rain and light drizzle on and off throughout. Something a bit brighter for northern England, North Wales compared to today. Further rain coming in across western and northern parts of Scotland. But again, much of Northern Ireland, eastern Scotland will be dry and bright. Temperatures here again close to average, but again quite mild in the south with temperatures as high as 11 or 12 Celsius. Through Tuesday evening, not a great deal of change. We've got a line of rain across the far northwest, some drizzly conditions over hills across western Scotland and North Wales, but otherwise most places dry, and that's how it's looking for much of the rest of this week. High pressure moving in, so most places dry from Tuesday onwards, often cloudy and increasingly could have some problems with fog.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family. Welcome back. Remember, just after 2:30, it's your time to tell us your views. Should the NHS be putting COVID first? Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews.
Now, more than 500,000 learner drivers are waiting to take their test because of a huge backlog. For large parts of the pandemic, learners were banned from getting their driving qualification. Now, the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency is being criticised for not doing more to reduce the long queues to test centres.
Will Hollis is our East Midlands reporter and joins us live from a test centre in Loughborough. Will, why is there such a backlog?
Good morning. Yes, from here in Loughborough in Leicestershire, I've seen it all this morning. People coming in to get their tests and then heading out on their journeys. It's around a 45-minute journey around the Loughborough area to do your practical test here. This is something that's been a persistent problem over the last few months since people were able to get their test again since April. If you remember, back in the pandemic, much like all sorts of industries, the tight confined spaces of a car was not a place to be doing anything at all, let alone a practical test. The government put in restrictions and stopped the driver learners from actually doing the test as well as the examiners. It was something that was banned. Now, even with a few months since that was allowed to happen again, since April, there's still a massive backlog, and it seems to be growing based on the data obtained by the AA driving school from the DVSA, the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency. More than 500,000 people, 500,000 people are still waiting to do their test. Most people are waiting around about 6 months. There's a 24-week backlog. That's about half a year, and it's causing a lot of problems inside of the learners industry, not just for the people that want to learn, but the examiners and the instructors as well. And as I said, the data obtained by the AA driving school, here's a quote from them about what's going on inside the DVSA at the moment. They're saying that driving instructors adapted to make lessons safer when restrictions lifted, but the DVSA has still not caught up enough to meet the demand, and questions need to be asked about what support they can get to ensure we don't end up in the same position if restrictions come back. That's the real worry here, that even if we're only in plan B at the moment, if we do end up with further restrictions over the next few winter months, what might happen to these people that are waiting to get their test or haven't even managed to book one yet?
It's an important story, Will. Good on you for highlighting it. It's not just ordinary folk who want to learn to drive and get their licences. It's also HGV drivers, of course. What's DVSA, what used to be called the DVLA, trying to do to fix this difficult problem?
Yeah, of course. It is affecting many different parts of the driving industry. It's not just maybe young people who are going to be the predominant number of people that are trying to learn, around that 18, 19 age gap. It's a bit of a rite of passage getting your driver's license. Yeah, of course, as you say, there are measures that DVSA, the government body for the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, what they are trying to do. They've got a few that I've been told. So one thing they're doing is weekend and bank holiday testing, and also recruiting new examiners while hiring the old ones that had already retired. It's something that we saw the NHS do in a period during the pandemic, trying to get doctors and nurses that had retired to get them back into the industry. It's something that really doesn't appear to be doing the job. I've spoken to instructors as well that said the difficulty here is while they're making more spaces available, it doesn't really matter because they don't have the cars available. Most people that do their test are going to do it in the exact same car that they learnt with. But we've got a year or so backlog of people who haven't been able to do any lessons. So the instructors need their vehicle to do those lessons. Therefore, they can't give them over to the other students that they might have to do their test. So it's a bit of a vicious circle. We were earlier today, we were speaking to Quentin Wilson. He's a motoring expert, and he told us his thoughts on what's going on behind the scenes.
This is just a byproduct of the pandemic, like so many other industries. And you can complain at the DVSA as much as you like, but the logistic feat of repurposing all those missed lessons and missed tests is quite considerable. So that's why we've got 500,000 kids waiting to take their tests. There are systemic problems in the whole way people are taught to drive, and we have a shortage of driving instructors. We have a shortage of driving examiners as well, and we need to encourage more people into this industry. If you ask the question, who would want to be a driving instructor or a driving examiner? It's like the HGV crisis. It's an industry we have not supported or cherished enough. So I'd be saying that we really do need to have a push to get more people in this industry so we've got more people able to test these kids and examine them properly. And the worst thing we could do would be to make standards easier, because road safety, the foundation of road safety, are those men and women who diligently test and teach these kids and make them into safe drivers. So it's something the government needs to look at. And I worry that the kind of 4 wheels bad, 2 wheels good culture that we've had over the last decade in this country is impinging on people investing and cherishing the whole driving, teaching, learning to drive culture in this country.
Will, any idea when we'll see the backlog being sorted, coming down?
it doesn't seem like a problem that's going to be going away anytime soon. While the DVSA are putting in these measures, it doesn't seem to be lowering that number. As I said, it does appear to be growing. Another measure that they have been putting in place is quite simply encouraging people not to take their test until they're absolutely ready. Right now, it's about 49% of people that actually pass the test. So there's around half of people are still going to have to take another test. They rejoin that queue. There's obviously a lot of discussion as to whether there'd be any lowering of safety standards or anything like that, and the DVSA are quite confident that that wouldn't ever be an option in relation to how they might test people. I will say earlier, I did see one young man come out of here and he did have his pass certificate. So some people are passing. He had a big smile on his face. Well, I think he was smiling. He was wearing a mask, but he was smiling with his eyes. So some people are passing from here in Loughborough today.
Eagle-eyed reporter that you are there. Will Hollis, our Midlands reporter, outside a driving test centre in Loughborough. Thanks for that.
Right after this break, it's all about your opinion, and we'll also hear from some of our other guests. But first, let's get the latest headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon. Let's get you up to date. The Prime Minister has confirmed at least one patient has died with the Omicron variant of coronavirus in the UK. Earlier this morning, the government also announced that around 10 people in England are currently hospitalised with the new strain. Meanwhile, people trying to order their lateral flow tests from the government website are being told there are no more home testing kits available. However, Boris Johnson says there is a ready supply of lateral flow tests and recommended getting them instead in shops and pharmacies. In addition, the NHS says those experiencing waits online to book an appointment for their booster jab should try again tomorrow as the website experiences high demand. Thousands of people in England are now working from home as part of the government's Plan B measures, which came into force today. It also includes the reintroduction of masks in public places, and from Wednesday, vaccine passports for nightclubs and larger venues will be required. England now joins Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, who already have those restrictions. In other news, 2 freight ships have collided off the southern coast of Sweden, leading one of the vessels to capsize. At least 2 people have been reported as missing. There are reports that a British-registered Scot carrier and a Danish ship came together. Authorities in Sweden and Denmark say several Coast Guard vessels and helicopters have been sent to the scene. Emma Raducanu has pulled out of an exhibition tournament in Abu Dhabi after testing positive for COVID-19. The British tennis star will now instead complete a period of isolation. You are up to date. I'll have more for you at 3 o'clock.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. Today we're discussing Boris Johnson's booster jab drive. Last night, the Prime Minister pledged to move the target of getting all over 18s their third dose by a month.
Earlier today, he confirmed that the first person in the UK has died with the Omicron variant.
Now, Professor Angus Dalgleish joins us. He's an oncologist, an infectious disease expert and a professor at St George's Hospital Medical School. Professor Dalgleish, we're delighted that you're joining us here on GB News today. What's your view of the Prime Minister's strategy to postpone some medical appointments across the NHS to focus instead on COVID booster jabs?
Well, first of all, I must say I've followed this very, very closely, and I tend to take far more weight from Dr. Curtis, the South African head of the Medical Association there, who's assured us, gave a very long chat yesterday, that it is very mild compared to anything else. And I think that is very, very important, because that's what we expect as viruses go round in waves. They get more infectious and they get less lethal. So why would you want to close down the health service yet again for something that is more infectious? Now, I look at it the other way. I think that it's so infectious, I don't think you can do anything about it. Just let us look at the figures on lockdown, as they again were discussed this weekend, very, very solid figures. Who had the worst lockdown in Europe? It was actually Belgium. Who had the least? It was Sweden. And what was the difference? Who had the worst death rate? It was Belgium. Who had the worst trouble across everything? It was Belgium. People say, oh, that's a European thing and Sweden's different. No, compare California and Florida. Virtually identical climates, everything. Florida, no lockdown. California, massive lockdown and restrictions. Who has the worst death rate? California. So I think we need to learn that doing all these things, trying to prevent spread, is, especially when they go up a gear and get more infectious, I believe it's a complete and utter waste of time. And that as soon as the virus goes through the population, it's probably the quicker the better. And in many ways, it could be an infectious vaccine, as it were. So with the death rate being much smaller, and yes, we hear that there's somebody in hospital with the vaccine, with the variant. If they hadn't been in hospital with the variant, I'd be very surprised, because it's terribly infectious. It's going through like wildfire, and people go to hospital and die, and they often go with the COVID, but they don't die of COVID because they're dying of other things. Like the tragic case that we heard of someone having to go to hospital with severe abdominal pain. If they go into hospital, that is the problem, and they pick up COVID, they get classified as COVID. So I think a lot of the figures that we hear about people dying of COVID in hospital is exaggerated. And as an oncologist, I am really, really concerned about people being put off. I know so many cases where the disease has gone from early, potentially curable, to being lethal or presented stage 4 disease, where it is a really big problem with a high chance of dying. So many people. I mean, the figure in calculation, one of the figures was 750,000 people will be affected over the next year or two. You cannot keep locking down an economy on and basically that is what they're doing. Just actually say we're going to have these boosters. And that brings me back to another thing, is that if you keep giving these boosters for this variant, which has escaped the last one, then the next variant will jump in because it will escape the other antibodies. And it underpins what I said right at the beginning of the pandemic. You do not go for antibodies in order to treat respiratory viral disease. It is the T-cell response. I propose a T-cell vaccine which would boost everything, and it doesn't matter when you have good T-cell responses what variant it is. It doesn't matter whether it's COVID or flu. And it's a very relatively easy thing to do, but it has been ignored. And I'm very, very concerned about that. And that is the action that I'd be taking. Instead of getting these more boosters, which are only going to last 3 months maximum, probably, yes, then you're going to need another booster. So you'll have the NHS shut down forever. No, I really think now's the time to be really
Professor, may I come in? Just because we haven't got too much time. I just want to put, just for reasons of balance, put what the Prime Minister has said this morning, get your interpretation of it. I know you take a different view, but I quote from the Prime Minister, "I think the idea that this is somehow a milder version of the virus, I think that's something we need to set on one side and just recognise the sheer pace at which it accelerates through the population." So he says it's not milder.
Basically, that he's being advised by the usual harbingers of doom that you've got to plan for the worst case scenario.
Science officers.
Well, I mean, if we plan for the worst case scenario, we're just going to have to lock down everything and never emerge again. So I totally and utterly disagree. And I repeat what I am saying. And I would say, why aren't we looking at more, proper advice for people? That one of the reasons people get these virus diseases at this time of the winter, and they do sweep through all sorts, is because they're low in vitamin D. They've done nothing about that, in spite of all the publicity. All right, for people who are very vulnerable, they decided they'd probably give them a small tablet, a dose which is far too low to be of any use at all. And this was due to very bad advice from the Scientific Advisory Committee on Nutrition. So I really do think they should be concentrating more on these things than trying to get everybody boosted and see the rest of the NHS collapse.
Professor Angus Dalgleish, an oncologist, an infectious disease expert and professor at St George's Hospital Medical School. Thanks a lot for joining us on GB News.
Now joining us, is the independent statistician, Jamie Jenkins. Jamie, you used to work for the Office of National Statistics. The statistics, how worried are you by the statistics? Explain them on Omicron, if you would.
So obviously we don't know too much about Omicron. Your previous guest was talking about kind of the GP coming down from South Africa saying that it's a mild variant. The Prime Minister's, I don't think he's saying it's not mild. I think he's just saying it's too early to kind of be able to tell that. So if we're looking at the figures of what's going on with COVID at the moment across the country, it's just considerably lower than this time last year, about 80% lower than this time last year. The number of patients in hospital depends on which parts of the country you're looking at, but they're upwards of at least 55 to 70% in different countries, lower than this time last year. Patients in intensive care of COVID are lower than this time last year as well. So all the metrics are pretty low. And I think that the big panics, obviously, with this getting this booster rollout is to try and get everybody vaccinated. Now, if you look at the older cases in the country, the older people who've had booster doses, we have seen COVID cases coming down amongst those. So you can see the impact. My big concern with the Prime Minister's announcements being, though, that I think this big drive to vaccinate the whole population yet again down to the age of 18, where we do know that the virus itself, even the current variant, is not so deadly for the younger people, is going to put at risk the elderly's care. We also know as well that at the moment there's around 79,000 or up to 79,000 people in care homes who've had two jabs who haven't had a booster. And we've got on top of that patients or people who are living at home who can't get out of the house. Now, I think the Prime Minister's getting the priorities wrong here in that trying to vaccinate and putting out kind of invites to under 30s. It's just absolute bonkers when we've got these people who haven't had their boosters yet. And the main problem is it's the Pfizer vaccine itself and the storage of it. And it's difficult to actually get out to some of these places. So I think if you want to save lives, that's the area we should be prioritising, not kind of cutting off the care to older people to vaccinate the younger ones.
Jamie, the Prime Minister would say that he's exercising the precautionary principle. It's better to be safe than sorry. These are all phrases that Cabinet Ministers are now using. If you don't go along with that, what would you do to respond to this Omicron variant, if anything?
Well, I think they're talking about kind of being cautious. There's no harm in being cautious, of course. But the measures that are being voted on in Parliament tomorrow, which is Plan B in England, we already have. I'm living in Wales. We've already got them, and we've got them in Scotland. The vaccine passed. There's very little, to the point that even last Friday, the First Minister in Wales, Mark Drakeford, was talking about everybody having lateral flow tests to leave the home because obviously the vaccine pass hasn't stopped the spread of the virus, really. I think if you were going to look in terms of doing things, obviously vaccinating the most vulnerable people is the critical thing. The people we know are going to be going potentially into hospital. We've seen the effect of all of that. But I think the question really is, how much should you be trying to vaccinate down that age group and then say people who want routine appointments with GPs can't get them. And we know the GP surgeries are generally filled up with older people because they tend to get sicker. So I think the key fact really is vaccinate boosters, get them out as quick as possible to those who need them. Don't rush them down to the age groups and cut off the care, because we had stats out last week telling us, excessive waits in A&E. And what happens when you can't get a GP appointment and you're ill? You go to A&E. So it's just going to clog up the system even more.
The Prime Minister will have a brutal day in Parliament tomorrow with critics from his own side. However, public support for Plan B, face masks indoors, 80% support, working from home rules, 78%, COVID passports at large events, 72%. As far as the public goes, the Prime Minister's in the right place.
And that's partly why he's going ahead. We've had polls in Wales throughout the pandemic with some of the restrictions that Mark Brakewood is putting in place. I think part of the issue is that a lot of public have been kind of scared over the last 18 months. I think if we actually look at the facts and figures, we're nowhere near in the same place that we were this time last year. And that's a positive thing. And that's been helped by the vaccine rollout. So I think when the Prime Minister's going on national TV, doing addresses to the nation, saying, Omicron, we need to boost everybody. People, I've got kind of memories that will remember this time last year and all the deaths that we saw, thinking that this is the next COVID virus that's going to kind of overwhelm the NHS and kill us all again. I think we are in a much better place than this time last year. We shouldn't be kind of resting on our laurels. We've got to be careful. I think people are acting sensibly, those who, want to be doing that. But I think just bringing in Plan B, the statistics don't suggest it's going to make any material difference, because we've got it in Wales and Scotland. And, I think if you're following the data and following the science, I think Boris, the Prime Minister, has got this one wrong on that aspect.
Jamie Jenkins, thanks a lot for joining us there. Jamie Jenkins, a former ONS statistician.
Professor Gordon Wishart has more than 30 years' experience as a cancer surgeon, and he is the Chief Medical Officer and CEO of Check for Cancer, a provider of early cancer detection services. Professor, the Prime Minister has made clear that the NHS must focus all its effort till the end of this month in offering every adult a jab. Is he right to do so?
Well, speaking from a cancer perspective, I do have concerns that, based on the impact of previous lockdowns on cancer services, that this might increase that message to stay at home. We know the impact of lockdown on cancer diagnosis. There are as many as 60,000 missed cancers as a result of successive lockdowns. And that's now leading to a delay in diagnosis. We know there are published reports of a move to later stage of diagnosis of certain cancers, including bowel, lung and prostate cancer. And that's going to drag down our already very poor cancer survival rates compared to many Western high-income countries. So I know that cancer services are under enormous pressure at the moment, but they were failing before lockdown. And they just don't have the additional capacity to be able to manage the number of people coming forward. We're seeing the 62-day target, that's for treating 85% of patients within 62 days of an urgent GP referral, just crashing. And since May of this year, it's been down in the low 70%. And then in September of this year, it was 68%. So we're already seeing, really slow access to cancer diagnosis and treatment at the moment. But what we don't want to do is discourage people from coming forward, which is what lockdown has done in the past and may well do, during the next few weeks, especially with the holiday period after that. It's going to be difficult for patients to be seen, I think, either by their GP or at hospital if they have suspicious cancer symptoms.
Professor Wishart, the National Audit Office brought out a report just a week or so ago saying that 750,000 cancer referrals that should have happened during this pandemic haven't happened for various reasons, not least the NHS focused on COVID. With that in mind, what do you make of the medical advice the Prime Minister's getting as he chooses to refocus the NHS onto COVID?
Yeah, well, I suppose I have concerns that that the government have failed to listen to what really was a very good cancer summit report that was put together by the joint all-party parliamentary groups. It had contributions from lots of cancer specialists, scientists, data analysts, the charities. It's really a very good report, and that was presented to government in May of this year. And to date, the cancer backlog and the cancer crisis has just not been acknowledged by government. And until they do so, I don't see how we're going to see additional resources put in place to help us not just, tackle a national cancer recovery plan, but to put in place a strategy going forward that lifts us out the mid-table cancer survival league tables.
Just briefly, if I may, I just feel that I should say, I think the Prime Minister would say this, that he does not want to delay cancer treatment. What he's talking about in terms of the vaccine programme is delaying some operations and non-urgent procedures. I just wanted to put that out there because I'm certain the Prime Minister would emphasise that.
I do accept that, but the stay-at-home message, which is essentially what this is, has had a really detrimental effect on cancer services in the past and may do again. That's my biggest concern.
Professor Gordon Wisher, Chief Medical Officer and CEO at Check for Cancer, thanks a lot for joining us here on GB News.
A spokesperson from the Department of Health and Social Care said, I'd point back to the Prime Minister's words yesterday on this, about the fact that if we don't do this, the electives gap would likely be even bigger next year.
You've been emailing us throughout the show with your thoughts on this really tough issue.
Russ says, I was diagnosed with cancer in April 2020 over the phone after an operation in March 2020. I have struggled with getting face-to-face appointments with my cancer specialist, and now the government have announced that some appointments, like cancer, etc., will be cancelled. I'm not sure they have said cancer treatments will be cancelled. I hope they haven't. The NHS need to carry on dealing with other illnesses like cancer and not forget people like myself and many others.
Sadie says, I've been waiting since the start of the pandemic for complex spinal and neck surgery, but it's been put off every time.
Noddy says, my heart is breaking for Lisa. I guess we spoke to her earlier. Such a brave lady for allowing her grief to be broadcast. My heartfelt sympathies for her and families like her.
Martin got in touch. This is not the time to stretch the NHS even more.
And Adrian says you should get your booster. We don't want this to get out of control anytime, but especially Christmas.
You've been watching Piero and Halligan here on GB News. We're back tomorrow at 2 p.m.
Up next is the PM briefing with Darren McCaffrey.
Thanks for all your emails and thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. A three-way split with the weather this Monday. Bright and blustery across the far north. Some rain across parts of northern England and Wales in particular. In the far south, it's mild, but it's pretty murky. The three-way split caused by this waving weather front straddling across the UK. This low brought some very strong winds through the night and first thing across the Northern Isles. Easing down a bit but staying blustery here. Showers across the Highlands, but much of Scotland, Northern Ireland dry and bright. Then this damp zone covering parts of Yorkshire through to Lancashire and across North and West Wales. Staying fairly soggy here. A bit damp and drizzly in the southwest. Much of the south dry but predominantly cloudy. But it is mild here. Temperatures could get into the teens, whereas only single figures further north. Add on that wind and it feels pretty fresh. And the showers continuing to come in across the Highlands and the Western Isles through the evening. The rain will trickle south, so turning damp and dank through South Wales and the Midlands for a time overnight. Some mist and fog is possible. Might just about drop down to freezing in one or two places, but certainly most towns and cities just about hovering above freezing and well above freezing in the south, staying very mild. But staying quite murky here, damp and drizzly for southern England, South Wales during Tuesday. Rain and light drizzle on and off throughout. Something a bit brighter for northern England, North Wales compared to today. Further rain coming in across western and northern parts of Scotland. But again, much of Northern Ireland, eastern Scotland will be dry and bright. Temperatures here again close to average, but again quite mild in the south with temperatures as high as 11 or 12 Celsius. Through Tuesday evening, not a great deal of change. We've got a line of rain across the far northwest, some drizzly conditions over hills across western Scotland and North Wales, but otherwise most places dry, and that's how it's looking for much of the rest of this week. High pressure moving in, so most places dry from Tuesday onwards, often cloudy and increasingly could have some problems with fog.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Join me, Alex Phillips, for the afternoon agenda on GB News, Monday to Thursday from 4 p.m. till 6 p.m. We don't lecture to you or try to tell you what to think. We do a deep delve into a topic with views from across the range of debate, therefore leaving you, the viewer, to make up your own mind. Join me, Alex Phillips, for the afternoon agenda on GB News, 4 till 6, Monday to Thursday. You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
A very good afternoon. Welcome to the Briefing PM with me, Darren McCaffrey. Over the next hour, a boost to the boosters, but with websites crashing and people queuing, and a suggestion that it's only been people being offered a vaccine by the end of the year, not necessarily delivered. We'll ask the question whether the government can get us protected before the end of the year. Also, Tory rebellion tomorrow on vaccine passports. It looks like well over 70 MPs, Conservative MPs, could vote against it. We'll be finding out why. And that Shropshire by-election later this week, a real test of Boris Johnson's leadership. That and so much more politics through until 4. But first, with the news at 3, is Rosie Wright.
Hello and welcome. I'm Rosie Wright. This is your news at 3 o'clock. The Prime Minister has confirmed at least one patient has died with the Omicron variant of coronavirus in the UK. Earlier today, the government announced that around 10 people in England had been hospitalised with the new strain.
Sadly, yes, Omicron is producing hospitalisations, and sadly at least one patient has now been confirmed to have died with Omicron. So I think the idea that this is somehow a milder version of the virus, I think that's something we need to set on one side and just recognise the sheer pace at which it accelerates through the population.
Meanwhile, people trying to order lateral flow tests from the government website are being told there are no more home testing kits available. Boris Johnson, though, says there is a ready supply of lateral flow tests and recommended getting them instead in shops and pharmacies. In addition, the NHS says those experiencing waits online to book an appointment for their booster jab should try again tomorrow, as the website experiences high demand. The Ministry of Defence has said around 750 servicemen and women will help deliver boosters and coordinate the rollout in England and Scotland. The Prime Minister also warned the accelerated booster vaccine rollout could be at the cost of other medical appointments. Virologist at the University of Warwick, Professor Lawrence Young, told GB News that these vaccinations will have a serious effect on people waiting for other treatments.
It's a real dilemma. It really is. And so I think we just have to be really concerned that what's going to happen over the next few weeks in this massive drive is going to mean we take our eye off the ball, and that backlog that was just starting to get to grips with that backlog or in GP practices and in hospitals is going to be further delayed, and that will have significant implications.
Well, thousands of people in England are now working from home as part of the government's Plan B measures, which came into force today. Transport for London says it saw a reduction in usage this morning, with an 18% decrease in journeys made on the tube, while bus services saw a 6% decline. Chief Economic Strategist Gerard Lyons told GB News that working from home will hit the economy.
Pandemic's latest variant will probably knock the economy in December, in January, possibly into February as well. So there will be a temporary hit to the economy, but that should not result in permanent changes to policy. So we need to weather the storm and hopefully move as quickly as possible through these restrictions.
Now, in other news, the US president has declared a major disaster in Kentucky after a series of powerful tornadoes hit the state. Joe Biden announced additional aid will be provided for 8 counties to provide temporary housing and to help fund home repairs. The governor says he fears more than 100 people may have died in Kentucky alone. The disaster has impacted more than 5 states across the country. 2 freight ships have collided off the southern coast of Sweden, leading one of the vessels to capsize. At least 2 people have been reported as missing. Media reports that a British-registered Scot carrier and a Danish ship came together. Authorities in Sweden and Denmark say several Coast Guard vessels and helicopters have been sent to the scene. Now, in the UK, more than 500,000 learner drivers are waiting to take their test because of a backlog that's been caused by coronavirus lockdowns. The figures come from the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency. The AA driving school has warned the backlog is too long and a clear plan is needed. Tests were halted during the pandemic, with many facing significant delays to book a test. Motoring journalist Quentin Wilson told GB News the industry has been neglected for too long.
And it's like the HGV crisis. It's an industry we have not supported or cherished enough. So I'd be saying that we really do need to have a push to get more people in this industry so we've got more people able to test these kids.
You're up to date. We'll keep you across the news all day here on GB News. But now back to the briefing with Darren McCaffrey.
Yeah, very good afternoon. Welcome to the Briefing PM, your afternoon fix of all the latest political news, debate and analysis here on GB News. I am Darren McCaffrey, and this is what's coming up over the next hour. More than 70 Conservative MPs could vote against COVID regulations tomorrow, particularly with vaccine passports coming under fire. We'll speak to some of those rebels in this programme, find out why they're not backing the government. Also, Labour have had their best polling since 2014. We'll speak to a Labour MP about what they think is the winning formula, getting voters on side almost 2 years on since that last general election, in which, of course, they were pretty heavily defeated. And with the travel list, could it be scrapped before Christmas? Well, reports suggest that the red list could be gone and further restrictions could be eased. We'll bring you the latest with a travel expert. And as always on the programme, want to hear what you've got to say? You can send me your views and opinions, emailing us at gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at gbnews. Very good afternoon and welcome to the programme on this Monday. Well, the Health Secretary has announced today that the booster jab is being boosted in many regards. It's being ramped up as hundreds of thousands have logged onto the website this morning. We are expecting a statement from Sajid Javid. He's going to give that to MPs in the next hour or so. And we'll bring you, of course, that live from Parliament. But first, we're going to start with the new COVID regulations, Plan B, which is due to be voted on in Parliament tomorrow. More than 70 Conservative MPs have already signalled their opposition to some of the curbs being voted on in 3 separate votes expected tomorrow afternoon. However, with Labour supporting the motions, it is almost certain they will pass. But either way, this is likely to be one of the largest, if not the largest rebellion Boris Johnson has faced as Prime Minister. And I can now speak to one of those MPs planning to rebel, who said this morning the new measures of the thin edge of authoritarianism. Let's welcome Marcus Fish, a Conservative MP who joins me down the line. Very good afternoon to you, Marcus. Thank you for joining us. First of all, just spell out why you are going to vote against your own government tomorrow.
I don't think the case has been made for such a large change to the way that individuals and states separate what they do. So I just don't think the evidence is there for this at this time.
You said the evidence isn't there. The government clearly thinks it is. It would argue this is about trying to protect the National Health Service. And then in the end, actually, the Plan B measures go nowhere near as far as other parts of Europe and actually bring England into line with Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
I'm more than happy to look at the booster programme in a positive light and to get behind that and encourage everybody to have vaccination, have their boosters to sort of try to stop spread of the virus. But the reality is that we are, as a nation, we're about 95% either vaccinated or have had a previous infection. And as a result, we should have general immunity, not immunity that necessarily stops transmission, which is what they've been worried about, but the general immunity that we all have should cover us against severe disease to a very great extent, and hopefully in a similar way to as has been evidenced is occurring in South Africa, in a way that is much more effective than against Delta. It's quite interesting, the evidence coming out of there. I was on another channel earlier with an immunologist from South Africa was saying that the death rate is about 1/10 of what it was against Delta in South Africa. So that is encouraging news. I'm not saying don't get boosted and things. Those are good things, and we should take responsibility for ourselves to do what we can to limit spread. I think that makes sense, but there is no need for something like vaccine passports, which is a step we don't want to take, I don't think, as a free society.
The professor of vaccinology at the university in Johannesburg today saying that of the 20,000 cases they've reported, about 25 people have died in South Africa of this new variant or of COVID-19. But during the course of Delta, when 20,000 cases were reported, they were seeing between 250 and 300 down a day, which I think is the statistics that you were talking about, Marcus. But I suppose fundamentally, we can talk about South Africa, we can talk about lots of other countries, and we can, but clearly the chief medical and scientific officers of this country don't agree with what you're saying. They have offered this advice to the Prime Minister. Shouldn't we listen to the country's top scientists rather than us trying to make up our own minds based on the data that you and I have heard from different places? Wouldn't it be irresponsible if the Prime Minister didn't listen to what scientists were saying? And the scientists seem to be saying we need to do something now in terms of slightly further restrictions.
So COVID passports won't make any difference anyway, because the evidence from Scotland is that they don't work to stop spread. And that they are saying that the vaccines don't stop transmission. Well, then that won't do anything towards that. So it seems more like a sort of, they are trying to use this as a kind of stick to encourage people to get vaccinated. I would prefer to use persuasion and positive messages about the benefits that it can bring against severe disease to get vaccinated in the first place. And I'd encourage everybody to be doing it on that basis. The thing is, these are not costless interventions. These are variants are going to come forward to this virus very regularly forever now. And we just cannot, and in all those cases, we won't have information about what they potentially do for some time. And we just can't keep locking the country down, taking more and more authoritarian measures, trying to frighten people. I would say try to get vaccinated, get boosted. Yes, those are useful things that we can do. But there's no need on the basis of the evidence that I've seen, and I don't think really the CMOs have had any better evidence, that means that people should be particularly fearful at this time. Indeed, if it turns out to be a more transmissible but seriously less severe version of the virus, that would actually be a really encouraging sign that we might be at the beginning of the end of the pandemic. And if we can just get this through this wave now, get boosted, limit the transmission in order to reduce pressure on the NHS, those things are fine, but don't bring in a vaccine passport thing that's going to be ineffective anyway and be a major change in the relationship between individuals and the state. It just doesn't make sense.
I mean, of course, it's your own government arguing, and indeed some of the scientists suggesting that, yeah, even if it is milder in terms of the symptoms, if it's far more transmissible, you could hit a peak in which the absolute numbers are higher. But we'll not get into the science because neither of us are scientists, and we'll leave that at the door for the time being.
But we can do basic maths. And even if the Secretary of State was right that we had 1 million cases by the end of the year, and he was right that it was a 1% hospitalization rate, that is 10,000 cases by the end of the year, according to him. But, you know, if you use doubling rates that they're working on, you can get to numbers that are more like sort of 3,500 cases in hospital by the end of the month. And while that sounds like a lot, it isn't that big in the scope of the whole NHS. Of course, we want to try and minimize it, but we don't. My point is that you don't do things like make vaccination compulsory in the NHS with a potential risk of losing lots of that capacity at this point. It just seems to be that they're kind of thrashing around for these solutions, whereas they should just be focusing on getting behind the booster message, which was a great message that everyone, I think, can support from last night.
In saying that, you earlier on today on the BBC talked about how this is the thin end of an authoritarian wedge, that we're not a papers, please society. This is not Nazi Germany. Many people think you went too far in that comparison. Do you stand by it?
Yeah, well, look, I probably shouldn't have touched that live wire because lots of people can interpret that sort of thing the wrong way. But what I meant was that you don't just give away little by little these basic freedoms like freedom of association, freedom to control one's own body. And I think in our society, we're much better off trying to make persuasive arguments about what the benefits are and then give people their own personal responsibility to do the right thing. And so that kind of erosion of liberty is how the sort of slippery slope towards terrible things happens. And in history, it is these horrible things started with just small things that people agreed to do because they thought it was good in the common interest, and they had kind of fear. There were terrible contexts of what was going on, whether it was inflation in that particular instance and all of the terrible history of the First World War and all that sort of thing. But it's just little, we need to notice little liberty losses along the way. Otherwise there are precedents set for loss of more liberty and more liberty and more liberty, and then suddenly, you get someone saying you have to be really afraid and you have to do this, and then
let me put it this way then.
Naturalize it being okay, and we don't ever want to go down that sort of path again, obviously. Yeah.
But let me put it this way then, though, and what your critics are saying today, which is essentially these are actually, at the moment, relatively limited restrictions in the middle of a pandemic, it must be said, on our liberty. And yet you voted for bringing in ID cards to vote in this country in normal times when there's very little evidence of voter fraud. That's an infringement on our liberties. Isn't that papers, please, sir, so that you can have the democratic right to vote in this country?
I think there are lots of circumstances in which we say who we are, And that's a slightly different thing to saying what your medical status is in order to be able to kind of do X, Y, and Z. That is a segregation. Everybody is able to get their identification. I'm a big fan of trying to make sure that we really work on inclusion to make sure that everybody can do that very easily. And actually, there are lots of modern ways in which that can happen in a more efficient way. So I don't think it's the same thing at all, talking about that.
And just very, very finally and quickly, Marcus, if you can, we'll let you go. Thank you for your time. How big do you think the rebellion's going to be tomorrow, and how serious is it for the Prime Minister?
Well, I don't know is the first answer to that. The reality is, with the Labour voting for it, because they have said they want to see vaccine passports, and in their view, they would only release us from them if everyone were vaccinated and if all children were vaccinated. So they definitely see that as an authoritarian control measure. But with their support, unfortunately, the government's going to win if they put it forward. I hope they will reconsider and not bring it forward, because I don't think it is something that right-thinking people should, when they really think about it, go along with.
OK, Marcus, appreciate your time and your thoughts. That is Marcus Fish there, Conservative MP, who is very much voting against his government tomorrow on that vote in Parliament on vaccine passports. As always, want to hear your views. You may agree with him, you may disagree. Do get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet us at gbnews, and we will, I promise, get to some of those opinions a little later in the programme. We're going to take a quick break, though, on the briefing this afternoon. Up next, why are Labour now doing so well in the polls? We'll be talking to a Labour MP, and we'll be telling you about possible changes to travel. Won't miss that in just a couple of minutes, but first, here's the weather from the Met.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello. Tomorrow will bring a dry day for much of the UK, but there will be more wet and windy weather in the northwest and some fairly damp and dank conditions at times across the south. There's a wriggling, waving weather front sitting across the UK at the moment. That is going to slip to the south as we go through the night, allowing things to turn a bit drier across northwest England and Wales, where it's still pretty soggy through much of this evening. But that rain, as I say, will be edging south, so turning damp across South Wales and the Midlands through the evening. Much of the far south just staying cloudy and maybe a little misty. And then that next area of rain coming into the northwest, with the winds picking up as well during the early hours. Where we've got the clearest skies, we could certainly see some pockets of frost over eastern Scotland, northern England in rural areas, but most towns and cities staying above freezing. On to Tuesday, and we're going to be fairly glum over the Midlands, South Wales early on. The remnants of that weather front still providing some drizzle. Could be misty and murky with drizzle at times along the south coast. Brighter skies for northwest England compared to today. Rain at times for western Scotland. Some very wet and windy weather across the far north. But northeast Scotland seeing a bit of sunshine. Northeast England bright enough, along with Northern Ireland. Temperatures mostly a touch above average. Certainly pretty mild again across the far south. So to tomorrow evening, that rain in the northwest will pep up and slip a little further south, so turning pretty soggy through the central belt and Northern Ireland as we head into Wednesday. Patchy rain too for northwest England, but again across the south, although it may stay fairly glum, most places will be dry, and I'm a bit more optimistic for some brighter skies across eastern England, maybe the North Midlands during Wednesday, but a sunshine and a brighter day in the far north with those winds easing down. Now, the winds are going to ease down for all of us over the next few days. Heading into the weekend, high pressure is moving in, so things turning drier, but that could also mean some problems with stubborn fog patches.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
I'm Darren McCaffrey, and join me on The Briefing Monday to Thursday at 3 p.m. You'll get your afternoon fix of all the latest political stories, debate and analysis, as well as interviews with some of the biggest names in UK politics.
It's a problem that affects the whole world, Darren.
From Westminster to Cardiff, Edinburgh and Belfast, if it's happening in UK politics, we've got it covered. That's The Briefing with me, Darren McCaffrey, Monday to Thursday, 3 p.m. on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Very welcome back to the briefing on this Monday afternoon. Thank you very much indeed for your company. Well, next up, Labour has had its biggest lead in the polls since 2014. It comes after numerous polls have shown a large majority of voters now think that Boris Johnson should resign as Prime Minister. It, of course, has been, 2 years since that general election. Pretty big disaster for Labour, with the Conservatives winning an 80-seat majority. But for now, Labour do seem to be in the ascendancy. Well, let's speak to one Labour MP, the MP for Ellesmere Port and Neaston, Justin Matters, who is also a former member of Labour's Shoulder Health team. Very good afternoon to you, Justin. I mean, clearly it's quite pleasing news that Labour now seem to have built up a reasonable and sustainable lead in the polls. But you know what? Many will say this is what happens mid-term, isn't it? With governments, their support tends to dip, and this is no difference.
Well, that's something we'll know an answer to in two years' time or so, when we've had the next general election. But we can't pretend that the 2019 election was anything other than a really, really poor result for us. So to have regained a poll lead after really what was a very, very bad result in just under 2 years, I think is a positive for us. And it's certainly a much better position than we've been used to recently. So we want to build on this. We want to continue to regain the trust of the public and hopefully persuade people that we are a serious alternative to the current government.
Of course, Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, is making an address, I think, to the nation tonight at 7 o'clock in response to what the Prime Minister had to say yesterday. And we'll have that for you on GB News. But in many ways, people would say that, well, Labour's poll lead is down almost to the government and getting themselves mired in scandal and messing things up rather than Labour, or rather than voters being attracted to the Labour Party, the old adage that governments lose elections, oppositions very rarely win them?
Well, that is an old adage, and whilst we're certainly getting plenty of help from the government in terms of our current poll position, I have no doubt, and the entire Labour Party is incredibly clear that actually, in order to win the next election, we do have to have people voting positively for us, not just to give the Conservatives a bloody nose. So it's really important that we maintain our message over the next 12, 18 months about how we will offer a clear alternative to the government. And I think the first thing we'll be hoping to persuade people is that we can actually be a lot more competent in the basics of government than this current lot.
You've also made an awful lot of ground, or you've made a big thing that Keir Starmer has of these allegations and these alleged parties that took place in Downing Street last year. For many voters, though, it's actually what's going to happen this Christmas and the weeks ahead that seem to matter more. And there is a sense that the Labour Party actually hasn't really been an opposing force to the government when it comes to COVID. Rather, actually, in many regards, pretty much very supportive of the measures that the government have taken.
Well, look, we're in a national crisis, so we're not going to play politics with individual votes. If the scientific advisors have recommended particular courses of action, then we will generally support the government in measures to implement them. What I think we'd say, though, is that actually on too many occasions the government have been too slow to actually follow the advice and implement it at the right time, which has meant that often we've seen more deaths, more cases and longer lockdowns than was necessary. So, look, we absolutely in agreement with the government about the need to get on top of COVID. And we won't be playing any parliamentary games to try and defeat the government when measures that they're proposing are, in the scientific world, considered necessary.
And just very finally, Justin, we know there's this big debate and a vote within Parliament, isn't there, tomorrow about vaccine passport. But the Prime Minister did talk last week about having a national conversation about vaccine mandates. And we've seen those elsewhere in Austria. German Parliament is looking at it as well. Where does the Labour Party stand on that? Surely the Labour Party, would they back vaccine mandates?
No, we're very clear that we don't think compulsory vaccination is an appropriate or indeed a helpful way to proceed. And it's probably worth saying that actually what we're being asked to vote on tomorrow isn't a vaccine passport. It's a vaccine passport or a negative lateral flow test. And that's something that we have been arguing for all along, because we actually do consider requiring people to show vaccine status as a condition of entry is discriminatory, which is why we think it is a positive move that the government have accepted our argument that showing a negative lateral flow can be an alternative. And we think that deals with a lot of the concerns that have rightly been raised about this issue.
But just on the idea of compulsory vaccination, if it was ever to be considered in Britain, you and your colleagues would oppose it.
Yeah, we don't think that is the right way to go. There's plenty of evidence that once you get into the realms of compulsion for these things, it can be very counterproductive. And look, we do know there's a lot of people, unfortunately, very sceptical about the benefits of vaccination. We think the best way to deal with that is to persuade and inform people rather than coerce them.
And I promise this is the last question, Justin. Just in terms of boosters, and we know we've seen queues today of people trying to get into vaccination centres, and the NHS website has been overwhelmed, I suppose in some ways in a good way, lots of people trying to log on to book their appointments. Whatever you think of the government, and you're obviously Her Majesty's opposition, they have done a pretty good job with the vaccine programme. Even with the booster programme, we're way ahead of almost any other country in Europe at this stage. And that has to be welcome news. The National Health Service, but the government as well, have managed to get on top of the vaccination process this year.
Well, I'd say that's certainly true for the first part of the vaccination programme. I don't think that the progress we've seen on boosters in recent months has been anywhere near where it could have been. Actually, if you compare the number of vaccinations given each day in recent weeks and months, it's been well below what we saw earlier on in the year. And given the very clear message that we've had about the need for everyone to get boosted as soon as possible. Actually, we think the government could have done a lot more, a lot sooner in respect of that too.
OK, Justin, really appreciate your time this afternoon. That's Justin Matters there, who's the Labour MP for Ellesmere Port and Easton, talking about the Labour Party and how they will, of course, be voting essentially with the government tomorrow when it comes to vaccine passports and indeed all the other measures that are due to be introduced in England with Plan B. OK, that is it for the time being on The Briefing. Do get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. We'll be looking at travel restrictions. Could they now be eased only weeks after they were introduced? But first, let's get the news at just after 3:30. Here's Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon. Let's get you up to date. The Prime Minister has confirmed at least one patient has died with the Omicron variant of coronavirus in the UK. Earlier today, the government also announced that around 10 people in England have been hospitalised with the new strain. Meanwhile, people trying to order lateral flow tests from the government website are being told there are no more home testing kits available. However, Boris Johnson says there is a ready supply of lateral flow tests and recommends getting them in shops and pharmacies instead. The NHS says those also trying to book a booster jab online should keep trying, as the website experiences high demand. Thousands of people in England are now working from home as part of the government's Plan B measures, which came into force today. It also includes the reintroduction of masks in public places, and from Wednesday, vaccine passports for nightclubs and larger venues are going to be required. England now joins Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, who already have those restrictions. One crew member of a Danish ship that collided with a British registered Scot carrier has been found dead, authorities have reported. The two ships collided off the southern coast of Sweden, leading to one of the vessels capsizing. Swedish prosecutors have said 2 crew members of the British vessel are in police custody. Kentucky residents in the US could be without heat, water and electricity as officials struggle to restore services following a series of powerful tornadoes. President Joe Biden has declared a major disaster in Kentucky and announced additional aid will be provided to 8 counties, including temporary housing and funding for home repairs. More than 100 people may have died in the disaster. We'll have a full update for you at 4 o'clock.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Very welcome back to The Briefing. It is, coming up to 20 minutes to 4 o'clock on this Monday, afternoon. Now, there were long queues outside vaccination centres today, and the NHS website did struggle to cope with demand as people try and book the third jab. There are even reports of the website crashing after the government promised to offer everyone a booster before the new year, which could mean 1 million jabs a day. Well, joining now is our reporter, Amelia Harper, who's been at a jab centre all day, now safely ensconced back home. Amelia, good afternoon to you. What was the mood like? Did you see long queues where you were in Hertfordshire?
Well, absolutely, Darren. I was outside the mass vaccination centre, Robertson House in Stevenage, and that had long queues all day. And at one point, police had to come out actually and turn people away that didn't have appointments. And I think this is just indicative of the demand that we have seen today. As you said, the NHS website actually crashing, and currently there's a booking system in place for people as they've been desperately trying to book their jab. So it seems that I think that press conference by Boris Johnson has really hit home for some people. Boris Johnson actually, in a tweet about an hour ago, said that 110,000 people tried to book a COVID jab of some sort. It's not clear whether that is the booster, but given the messaging last night, it wouldn't surprise me if that was a push, particularly for boosters. But that was before 9 a.m. this morning. So we have seen a huge drive. The NHS has tweeted as well to say it's experiencing extremely high demand. So we are seeing people taking that messaging seriously. But then again, we have also, I've seen doctors taking to Twitter, for example, to say that, well, we found out at exactly the same time as everyone else that we are now going to have to increasingly, dramatically increase our workload over the next 18 days in that run up to Christmas and the New Year to try to reach those new targets. But as this is all coming, as Boris Johnson has, of